What's up, JHM? Anyone else a huge superhero fan? Like, I love Marvel. I count down the days for when a new superhero movie is gonna come out. I cried during the last Avengers. I sleep in superhero pajamas, and I have a life-size replica of all of the Marvel superheroes in my house. Okay, maybe I'm not all that committed. I wish I was, but the point is, I love Marvel. And out of all the possible superheroes for me to like, my favorite is easily Captain America. Like, no contest. Why, you ask? Well, he's my favorite because honestly, I relate to him the most. Now, I know most people think it's because of my stunning looks, my impressive muscles, our top-notch morals, but surprisingly, it isn't actually that. Okay, maybe that's not surprisingly at all for anyone else, but the truth is, I relate a lot to Steve Rogers. You know, the guy behind Captain America. Because honestly, I can't relate very much to taking down Hydra, walking around with a huge shield, or living like forever. But Steve Rogers? Well, I can look back growing up and remember all the times that I felt like I was too small. Or when I felt like people overlooked me, or said I wasn't good enough. I understand what it's like to want to make the world a better place, but feeling like I couldn't because I wasn't good enough. You see, I love Captain America because the very first movie took the time to show us his backstory. The writers knew that in order for us to understand Captain America, they first had to show us the backstory of Steve Rogers, a little guy from Brooklyn. And you know, the same thing is true for us. Just think about this. How many people in our lives, in our neighborhoods, on our teams, or even in our small groups do we assume that we know? We might feel confident that we know the stories of some of the people just because we know some things about them. Like maybe their name, or what they're good at, or what they're into, or what it comes to clothes, or music, or friends. We think we know the full picture of who a person is because of what we can see. The way they act, the way they live, who their friends are, and more. And that tells us all we need to know, right? Well, not exactly. See, we can know a lot about a person, but not really know them. Just like in Captain America, there's a really good chance that there is more to the stories of people around us than we see or than we know. Because here's what I know is true. Everybody has a backstory. And each and every person that we think we know, there's more to their story than we can see. And if we really want to know somebody, we have to understand where they come from. We have to see more than just what's on the outside. We have to look to understand people, their experiences, their beliefs, and more that make them who they are. Now, I think you probably know what I mean because you have a backstory of your own. You know that in your life, there's more to the story, and you want people around you to recognize that too. Maybe you got angry and yelled at a sibling this week, and you found yourself thinking in your head, like she'd only knew if she understood the friend drama going on right now. Or maybe you turned in an assignment late and thought like, my teacher would be more understanding if he just knew the internet was broken at our house this week, or how exhausted I am from Zoom. Maybe you stopped texting a friend back and thought, they have no idea how depressed I am. And if they did, they know why I'm not responding. See what I mean? That stuff going on that you wish other people would consider, that's your backstory. It's what you're dealing with. It's where you're coming from right now. And if you're like me, you wish people would try to understand a little bit more of it from time to time. But I think the question for all of us is this: do we give the same kind of grace and consideration to other people? I know sometimes I don't. The reality is, we rarely consider other people's backstories. We don't often stop to consider where they're coming from, or maybe what's going on in their life right now. And because of that, we don't ever really personally know them. So how do you or I begin to know and see somebody's backstory? How do we make an effort to understand where people are coming from? How do we make it personal? And thankfully, Jesus gives us a great example to follow. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at a cool story from Jesus' life, a couple thousands of years ago, when he was traveling in ancient Israel and came across the town that was home to a well-known bad guy. I know we talked about superheroes earlier, But this guy, he was more of a super villain in his community. His name was Zacchaeus, and he was a tax collector, which basically meant he cheated his neighbors out of money so that he could get rich and have good status. Messed up, I know. And even though his reputation was rough, when he heard that Jesus was in town, Zacchaeus went out and made an effort to see him. He wanted to catch a glimpse of Jesus, so much that he climbed a tree just to see if he could spot Jesus in the crowd of people. And what's crazy is that of all the entire crowd, Jesus noticed Zacchaeus up in that tree. And not only that, Jesus walked right over and called Zacchaeus by name and told him to come out of that tree. Why? Well, for a reason that no one was expecting. To hang out. Yes, that's right, you heard me right. Jesus wanted to hang out with Zacchaeus, to spend time to get to know him. And not just anywhere, Jesus wanted to go to Zacchaeus' home, the place that he came from. Look, take a look, check it out. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Luke 19, 5 and 6. I realize that Jesus inviting himself over to Zacchaeus' house, that might seem a little bit weird or funky for us. And it would have been just as crazy in that culture 2,000 years ago. Zacchaeus wasn't a good dude, and everybody knew that. Jesus knew it too. But Jesus wasn't satisfied with just knowing about Zacchaeus. He wanted to take the step of going right to where he lived. He wanted to really get to know Zacchaeus, not to just know who he is now, but his backstory too. See, there's something about where we live that says a lot about who we are. Where we live is usually the place where we're most comfortable. It's the place where our guard comes down and we can be who we really are. Can you imagine Jesus coming over to Zacchaeus' house? Zacchaeus kicks off his sandals, puts on his barbecue apron, and kicks it back with Jesus cooking up a few burgers. Like, how crazy would that be? Now, I'm not sure that's exactly how it went down, but one thing is clear. Jesus wanted to make it personal. Sure, he already knew everything about Zacchaeus because he's Jesus after all, but he still decided to take a step into his world to get to know him. Jesus made it personal with Zacchaeus when he took a step to understanding his backstory. Visiting Zacchaeus' home meant that Jesus would get to know him in a very personal way. Jesus would catch a glimpse into the backstory of Zacchaeus. But that visit to Zacchaeus' home, Jesus showed Zacchaeus that he was accepted, his backstory and all. See, where we live isn't just a physical address. It's a place that gives others a glimpse into our personal circumstances, our situations, our day-to-day lives. Where we live is a part of our backstory, and it's the part most people don't typically get to see. And what's so cool is that what Jesus did for Zacchaeus was an example of something that Jesus does for you and me too. He may have walked into just one man's house that day, but it gives us a small glimpse into the way that God stepped into all of our lives when he chose to send his son, Jesus, to earth. The God who created the universe stepped into our world to understand where we came from, to show us that he cares about us, that he cares about understanding our backstories in a real and personal way. You see, it's personal because Jesus understands your backstory too. He knows our stories because he knows where we live and what it's like to walk in our shoes. He doesn't just see and understand a little bit about us. He knows us because he knows our whole story, and he loves us no matter what that story looks like. If the way we treated other people is going to be personal, then we have to choose to understand their stories like Jesus did for us. So where do we start? Well, before we get to know others, we might just need to become known ourselves. For some of us, our first step might actually be to acknowledge that Jesus wants to know you personally. In fact, he already knows you better than you know yourself, but you might need to invite him into your story. He wants to be a part of your life in a real and personal way. And you could talk with your small group leader or a friend about what it means to follow Jesus and experience life the way that he says is best for you. Then, it might be time to let somebody else into your story. Your next step might be to share more of your story with somebody else, and not just a random person or a stranger. That would be really, really weird. But someone who really cares about you. Someone you trust who is already a big part of your life. And a great place to start would be with your small group. What if you started to share just a little bit more about where you come from? What if you told them a little bit about what your life is really like? What if you opened up to share more of your backstory? It could be the step that helps them know and care about you personally in a way that nobody else could before. And maybe you're in a place where you want to make it personal for others, the way that Jesus did for you. You could do this by giving somebody the gift of going second. And all this means is you be the first one to share. You have the courage to share a little bit of your backstory so that other people know that it's safe to share theirs. And when you share just a little bit about what you're living with right now, it can give somebody else the boldness to do the same. And when somebody does share their story with you, make sure to choose to listen and ask questions to learn more. When you show somebody you care by listening and wanting to know more, you show them just how personal getting to know their story is for you. Just imagine if getting to know the stories of your classmates, your teammates, your neighbors, maybe even your family was something that you took personally. You'd start to see people for who they really are instead of who you think they are. You'd become known as a person who really cares, a person they could trust, a person who wants to know people in a real way. You actually have an opportunity to do just that in your small group right now. It's a place to ask questions, to listen, to get to know their whole story, and you could share your story with them in return. So remember, quick recap, it's personal because Jesus understands your backstory. And as you get ready to share a little bit more of your story with your small group today, I want you to start by thinking about this. What's one thing most people don't really know about me?